Hi, I'm Len Epp from LeanPub, and in this LeanPub Front Matter podcast, I'll be interviewing Aymen Amri. Based in Paris, Aymen is a cloud architect and DevOps proponent who has worked as the head of IT and DevOps at a Parisian startup and is the founder and CEO of Era Labs, a consultancy working with companies around the world. Aymen is the author of 3 LeanPub books: Saltstack for DevOps, Extremely Fast and Simple IT Automation and Configuration Management, Painless Docker, Unlock the Power of Docker and its Ecosystem, and The Jump Start Up, a practical handbook for leading Agile and DevOps transformation. Aymen also blogs at medium.com/@eon01, and you can follow him on Twitter @eon01. In this interview, we're going to talk about Aymen's background and career, professional interests, his books, and at the end we'll talk a little bit about his experience writing as a self-published author. So thank you, Aymen, for being on the LeanPub podcast.
Hi, Len. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for taking some time out of a Parisian evening to talk to me on this podcast. So I usually like to start these interviews by asking people for their origin story. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you first became interested in computers and software?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I grew up in Tunisia. It's a small but a very beautiful country in North Africa. Given the name, people may think that it's Indonesia, but the pronunciation is quite similar. It's Tunisia. My story with computers and software started when I was young with video games and consoles. And I guess it's the same thing like the majority of people from my generation. I had an Atari console, and even with its low graphics, it was and it still is one of the best consoles that I played with. And I was also a huge fan of Sega Mega Drive console and Sonic video games. And I remember my debate topics with my friends at this time. It were all about which is the best video game character, Mario or Sonic. And I got my strong opinion on this. The first time I started coding, it was when I was probably 13 or 14, and I created a small arcade game. It was strongly inspired from Mario, and it was with one of my friends. That was like doing social coding and pair programming at that age. Well, it was really funny for me to code my own game, even if it was very basic. And at this time, I started to be more interested in programming. And the fact also that my father is a telecommunication engineer and my uncle had the computer store helped me a lot to start programming at an earlier age, and made my interest to computers and software grow faster. And I had also the chance to get an early access to internet when there were only few websites like Alta Vista and Yahoo, Lycos, etc. And I was always curious about how internet works, so I started to move my interest from video games to web development and system and network administration. So this is how I became passionate about computers and software.
Can you talk a little bit about what the education system is like in Tunisia and your path through it? In your LinkedIn profile under high school, when I was researching for this interview, I noticed you list a bachelor in mathematics and computer science, which might be an unfamiliar thing to do in reference to high school to many of our North American listeners.
Yes, there are probably some differences between the education path in my birth country and the North American countries. For me, it's more similar with some European countries, but we do have the primary school, the college, the high school, the university, the master and PhD degrees, etc. But for your question about the bachelor degree, well, after the college education, students have the choice to follow a branch for the high school. For me, I made the choice of following the branch of mathematics and IT over other fields like the natural science, literature, or economics. And my choice was motivated by the fact that I always wanted to continue studying software engineering in the university. So after 4 years in high school, students should take a national exam called baccalaureate. Yeah, the word origin is French, right? And in my LinkedIn, I translated this to bachelor. So during this exam, all students must take, regardless of their field of study, many exams in different subjects like mathematics, philosophy, computer science, etc. And the diploma is most probably the equivalent of US high school plus the first 2 years of US university. Well, after this diploma, I've got a university degree in computer networks and telecommunication, followed by a diploma in IT engineering and a master degree in the same field. Then I moved to Sweden after that, and where I studied something really different from what I studied before, which is social innovation in a digital context. And it's a master program focused on the fields of digital technology, new media, and socio-political change. So for me, studying was really funny, but I was the lazy guy who studied at the end of the year, just a few days before the final exam. After Tunisia and Sweden, and now I'm living in Paris since a few years. I'm not studying here in Paris. It's time now to earn a living, and I'm working on the fields of cloud computing and software engineering. And I started my own companies and projects.
You mentioned that eventually you completed a master's degree in software engineering. Was that an experience you would repeat? I have talked to many people on this podcast about their opinions concerning the importance of not getting formal training in software as a way of preparing for a career as a software engineer. And about half say that if they were starting out now, they would not do a university degree.
Yeah, I don't have a yes-no answer for this, but I think that it depends on many things like the motivation and the goal of every one of us. If you'd like, for example, to become a doctor, you should finish your studies. No one will go to a self-taught doctor, right? But in this specific case of software and IT, I see that they make a difference between software development and software engineering. For someone having the goal of becoming a software developer, I think that having a university degree is not really something that could add much value to his career. But a practical training would fit better probably this goal. But if someone would like to do a software engineering role, I think that university is important. Plus, you should have some practical trainings. In my case, during my university years, I studied a lot of mathematics and physics. And even if they were not my main field, but they were like gymnastics for the brain. So that's why I think that studying in general and the university specifically could teach us an important thing, which is the skill of learning how to learn. I don't say that university is the best place to learn, but it could be a relatively good part of our learning path.
You mentioned you spent a year at Lund University in Sweden earning a diploma in social innovation in a digital context. Can you talk about that program and what drew you to it?
Sure. Yeah, it's a one-year master's program, and it's carried out by the Internet Institute of Lund University. It's a university in Malmö, in the south of Sweden. And this program supports social and digital innovators from many countries. And it supports these innovators to pursue projects in the fields of digital technology and new media. Some years ago, I started building a small social network with the goal of experimenting how it could be helpful for local and direct democracy. So I was interested in this kind of projects and how we can use technology to make social change happen. And having similar projects was one of the criteria to be accepted in this master program, actually. So I was interested and curious about this. I applied and I was accepted. Now there is a tool called Democracy OS. There are many other tools, and Democracy OS, for example, is a tool that is quite similar to the project I started before. And this master programs was really a good experience for me.
This may seem like a bit of a random question, but do you believe that people should be able to vote in elections over the internet? I'm asking particularly in the context of concerns in the United States about foreign election meddling and the ongoing discovery of major security flaws such as the Meltdown and Spectre flaws. Even if we could have a perfect technology, it seems like online voting would be a special kind of target for people to make claims about election meddling, even where none existed, which is just another form of meddling, of course.
Yeah, it's a random but interesting question. I think that one day people will be able to make 100% of votes online, and there is actually no system with zero flaws, but this is also could be applied to any offline system like the traditional voting system. So I think that the major obstacle of online voting is not just the security, but also the culture. Like you said, people could claim about election meddling even where none existed. So they are used to the classical way or the traditional way of voting. And the main problem with moving to an online voting is primarily cultural before being technical. So I believe that some technologies right now, like blockchain, have a great potential and may change the way we vote. So if people accept to change their culture regarding some critical events like the elections, I think that, and I believe that technology will follow.
You're the founder and CEO of Era Labs, a cloud and DevOps consultancy based where you are in Paris that does work for companies around the world. What's the origin story of Era Labs?
Yeah, Era Labs is a consultancy company and a one-stop shop for DevOps projects and cloud-based projects. We are based in Paris, but many of our customers are in US actually. Before Era Labs, I worked with many companies from small to large organizations in many countries in different roles and acquired a good experience during these years. But I always had a will to achieve greater things, and creating Era Labs was the first step. Now I'm happy to provide my DevOps services to many companies, and some of them are in the top 10 world-class companies, and this is really rewarding and motivating for me.
You're also a founder of DevOps Links, a community for people in IT and DevOps. Can you talk a little bit about what DevOps Links is and how the community has developed?
Yeah, I like communities and working with communities to achieve common goals. This is actually why I am a huge fan of open source and free software. And DevOps Links is also a community that I started 2 years ago, or probably a little bit more. We have a weekly newsletter where I hand curate must-read articles and tutorials, a Slack channel where everyone could ask and find answers about DevOps, cloud, CI, CD, etc. We have also a Medium publication, a job board, jobsfordevops.com, and I am working on other projects like a collaborative community blog. When I started this project, DevOps Links, we were a few tens, and now we are a few thousands, and each day new people are joining, and it's a pleasure to see that the community is growing, actually. I'd like to say hello, by the way, to DevOps Links members.
One of the privileges of this podcast is that I get to talk to people from all over the world, and I wanted to ask you, what's the startup scene like in Paris these days?
Yeah. I consider Paris as one of the most growing startup hubs. There are many startups here, from deep tech to IoT to fintech. During the last 5 years, the number of incubators and accelerators remarkably increased, and this is really interesting. Some of these startups moved to US actually at a certain stage, but this doesn't prevent the others from innovating and growing.
What's the story behind your book, Saltstack for DevOps, Extremely Fast and Simple IT Automation and Configuration Management? I'm curious what inspired you to write it.
Yeah. This was my first book, and Saltstack is a data center orchestration and configuration management tool that helped me a lot in one of my previous experiences. We were a team of 14 engineers working on a big project. If I remember the right numbers, it was a project with 2 different versions. One of them is a legacy version, 12 different environments, and each of these environments has 3 sub-environments, testing, staging, and production. Saltstack helped me to manage the configuration of all of these projects and environments and sub-environments, and orchestrate how all of these works. At that time, I found that the official documentation was not enough for me. So I was looking for some online books, and the first book that I found was on limpub.com. And it was a free book, but it was not enough, and it was not really complete. So I decided to write a book about this tool, actually. And I made my first sale just a few hours after publishing it, and it was really awesome. The first sale actually is always the best sale. We never forget it.
In your Painless Docker book, you write about how, quote, developers think they are here to serve the machines, end quote. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I remember this. In my previous experiences, I worked as a system administrator, but also as a developer. And during these years, I always noticed that there are always conflicts between these two teams. So I wrote about the common idea that developers think that they are here to serve the machine or to feed it each period of time with a fresh code to deploy. The machine is hungry and should eat, otherwise it will stop working and the boss will be angry. I wrote also about system administrators who think that machines should be happy. Feeding the machine will make it sick and hungry, especially with obsolete code. It will stop working and the boss will be angry too. So it was like an ironical way to describe the conflicts between developers and system administrators. And it was an opportunity for me to introduce DevOps and cross-team collaboration to the reader.
In the Jumpstart Up, you write that, quote, how innovative is my product is not more important than how am I developing it, end quote. Can you talk about why that is particularly true now? You write also about how the digital world is changing its formula.
Yeah, in our time, if you think about an idea or a product, even the most innovative one, I'm sure that there is someone else who had the same idea before you. So the idea is not really as important as how you are going to realize it. After some months or years of development, some startups may encounter some technical problems that could be blocking for their growth. So I've seen also some of this in my previous experiences. So the best way, I think, to solve these problems is avoiding them and asking this question at an early stage. How am I developing my idea or my product? And here I am talking about scalability problems and technical limits of the developed product, the best development practices, the security in mind, and technological choices.
And what do you mean when you talk about infrastructure as code?
I mean all the processes to manage and provision infrastructure using code. Tools like Saltstack, Ansible, Terraform, or Amazon CloudFormation are actually infrastructure as code tools. And in my humble opinion, a real DevOps transformation, especially for big companies, cannot be done without using infrastructure as code. I think it's impossible to do DevOps transformation without this. So, because it allows any organization to track all the changes on the infrastructure, since it's managed using a code. And since a code could be versioned like any software code using systems like Git. So the complexity of managing and running infrastructure is reduced to managing code and configurations, which is actually easier, faster, but also shareable across teams.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you found out about LeanPub and why you chose us for your publishing platform? As I understand it, you had offers from conventional publishers to write books with them.
Yeah. Like I said, I found LeanPub the first time when I was searching for a book about salt. I didn't find the good one, so I decided to write my own. Now I had some offers from conventional publishers to write new books for them, or to publish 2 of my LeanPub books with them. But until now, I didn't accept any offer because I prefer freedom and less conditions. So I'm working on other projects, actually, like transforming my books to online trainings for B2C and B2B customers. So painless Docker training, for example, could be found at painlessdocker.com, and probably in the future I'll do the same with my book Saltstack for DevOps.
You publish your books while they're still in progress. What do you find attractive about this way of publishing?
Yeah, LeanPub helped me a lot with the Lean publishing, and I'm thankful for this. I tested my first book using LeanPub, and for me it was a success because it was the first book. So I published the second, I'm still publishing the third. Now I am working on my online academy, and what I like about LeanPub is the Lean. I'm passionate about DevOps because it incorporates many Lean principles like the continuous improvement. And for me, Lean publishing is about 3 things. First, it's about testing the market. And at the second place, it's about self-motivation because selling your book while it's in progress brings a lot of motivation. And finally, it's about continuous improvement based on the continuous feedback from the readers.
That leads me to my next question, which is communicating with readers important to you, and how do you manage feedback from readers?
Yeah, to me, communicating with my readers is probably the most important thing, or more important than anything else. And in order to keep in touch with my readers, I simply add an email to the book preface, and I also invite them to join my community or my newsletter, or the community Slack team chat.
My last question is always, if there was one problem with LeanPub we could fix for you, or one feature we could build for you, what would you ask us to do?
Yeah, I talked about the continuous improvement based on continuous feedback. And I think that having a system of annotation, using it, the reader could annotate and comment a paragraph or a sentence, and could also add suggestions or questions. These kind of tools could help in having a continuous feedback and producing customer-based or reader-based and feedback-driven quality books.
Thanks for that very, very clear feedback. That's really, really helpful to us to hear about that kind of thing from really, really smart authors. Well, I wanted to thank you, Aymen, very much for being on the LeanPub Front Matter podcast and for being a LeanPub author. And I wish you more first book sales in the future.
Thanks. This was really fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thanks.